Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. Gavan Casey here, as always, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague and dear friend, Murray Kinsella of the 42. Murray, how are you?
Yeah, doing well, Gav. It's been a crazy, manic, chaotic week, really, but all is good on this end. How are things?
Super thanks. Busier as well. I think most sports desks across the country are fairly stretched at the moment. First time ever that the Euros and the Lions have coincided, I'd be guessing, just because obviously the Euros were rescheduled and you've got the Olympics on the horizon, so there were media days for that this week. It's been fairly crazy. Have you ever looked at the comment sections of our YouTube videos, like this podcast on YouTube?
No. Why? What are they saying?
One of the guys last week commented saying, "Stop asking the lads how they are, just get on with the rugby chat."
Well,
I was feeling that myself. Great comment. Was it Barry Jackman? No. Yeah, we lose about 5 minutes. So yeah, let's crack on.
All right, well, I take it that you're grand, Birch. We'll chat about, what you'd expect us to chat about today. Lions, Ireland U20s, and look ahead to Ireland's test with the USA as well at the weekend. But I wanted to start with another little bit of feedback or a request that we got from Breffney Kingdom on Twitter, which was, Murray, to discuss that new Super Cup that has started, or is going to start, I should say, between some of the teams from sort of non-traditional rugby areas, some exciting looking franchises, and a chance for them to have an actual, hopefully sustainable and exciting competition, albeit we probably don't have the full details yet as to where we can watch it and so on.
Yeah, it is exciting. The Rugby Europe Super Cup, grandly named. Clubs from Georgia, Portugal, Spain, Russia, Israel, Belgium and Netherlands. I suppose the one that's sticking out there who aren't involved is Romania, and their union came out with a statement saying they couldn't afford it, essentially. They didn't have the cash, given all the challenges at the moment, to actually enter a team into this competition, which is a real disappointment, particularly given the strong performance their national team had against Argentina just last weekend. They pushed Argentina all the way, and the Pumas needed a late try in the last 10 minutes to win that game. So that is disappointing, but from the other side of things, it's exciting for the countries who are involved, and it's exciting for rugby to, I suppose, have this showcase for those nations to kind of further their causes. Someone like the Netherlands, who've now pushed into the Rugby Europe Championship. You saw them playing against Georgia after being promoted. Wonderful to see, I suppose, progress in rugby nations that aren't really renowned, because as we've discussed in this pod before, it's been a bit of a close shop. Someone like Japan emerging is brilliant for the game, and we'd hope there are more examples of that in the future. So I'm excited to watch it. As you say, we waiting on some of the details. I would imagine there'll be an online element to that for people outside of the competing nations. But I'll be interested to see what the standard of play is like, bringing the very best of those nations into a club side. It could be a really interesting competition and feels like a really positive step for rugby.
Yeah, hopefully it does become available online, Birch, so that a kind of more global audience, or at least a European audience, can tune into it. And that was one of the encouraging things I noticed when the announcement was made, was that there seemed to be significant interest in how to watch it. And it's all well and good for the likes of us, or for people who generally or genuinely care about rugby, to call for the game to expand into countries where it hasn't quite had a foothold traditionally, but ultimately, you have to kind of put your money where your mouth is as well, for want of a better expression, and actually pay attention to it when they make this effort to have a competition for these teams.
Yeah, and I do think people will, if they can avoid clashing with the big competitions, I think rugby fans will watch. I agree with Murray. I was tracking that Romania-Argentina game, and I was shocked how close it was, and I still kind of felt at 20 minutes to go Argentina would pull away. So that's one that's downloaded to watch. But yeah, the best thing those countries can do is, when they get an opportunity to play a higher ranked team, is to put in a performance like that. So the fact that they were that competitive is really promising, and it's looking like they are getting their act together in terms of getting a better competition structure for them to develop.
Let's move on to the Lions, and I'll start with yourself, Murray. What is it like covering that at the moment on a day like yesterday, when you're not even in the touring country yet?
Yeah, it's strange, but I think it's just as strange for the people who are over there talking to the guys who are... There's 4 journalists in in South Africa at the moment. They were at the stadium, not sure whether the game was going ahead. Same as us back here, same as Sky Sports who were broadcasting it. Alex Payne's intro was that we're 2 hours away from kickoff, we hope. It was a very strange situation. So it has been, as I mentioned, chaotic, and we've had the breaking news from Springboks camp, from Georgia camp, from Bulls camp, and eventually from Lions camp of positive COVID cases. It's not a major shock, I suppose, that this is causing disruption. It was probably always likely that it would be the case, but it certainly has raised some question marks over how things are going to proceed and what we're going to end up with in terms of a test series. Like, imagine this chaos in the week of the first test, the Boks with 12 positive cases, some of their key guys in isolation as well as close contacts. And the Lions obviously only had one player, but another 8 were close contacts and had to isolate. So it could cause absolute havoc in the test series, and it's maybe an example of what can happen, as well as a reminder that even with their bubbles, these biosecure bubbles, avoiding contact with the outside world, this Delta variant is so transmissible and infectious that it can get in there as well. So it is concerning that all the rugby squads currently in South Africa due to be involved in those big fixtures this weekend have COVID in their squads. And listen, we don't know what happens next. It looks like there's going to be a rematch with the Sharks this Saturday, according to reports from SuperSport and SA Rugby magazine over in South Africa. But at the time of speaking, the Lions are still waiting for their latest test results, and they'll be very hopeful that the outbreak is confined to those couple of cases yesterday.
Yeah, it seems as though that rematch will depend upon some of those players being able to return from self-isolation, hopefully today, as Warren Gatland was saying last night. Birch, without asking you to predict the future, I guess it does feel a little bit... Messi's a little bit unfair. Everybody's doing their absolute level best for this tour to go off without a hitch. It was always likely, as Murray says, that cases were going to be a factor. But every now and then, when you hear of 12 Boks, it does feel like it's teetering on the brink a little bit, to the point that you'd actually doubt it possible for a test series to take place unless they can kind of curtail that fairly certain. What are your thoughts on the whole thing? And I guess if you could get in the heads of players over there as well, not necessarily just the players who, say, found out at short notice they wouldn't be available yesterday, but I guess players that are working towards something. I mean, giving up their summers for this great honour, yes, but working towards a test series that feels a little bit more uncertain, and I guess each individual's inclusion or involvement also feels a little bit more uncertain when you have this Delta variant that is seeping into squads.
Yeah, I think it's very close to being finished, to be honest. I think if it gets any worse, they're going to have to make a really radical call. The thought of having to watch the Lions British and Irish Lions against the Sharks again is demoralising for me. I thought it was horrendous quality. I actually turned it off. It's one of the rare times I turn off an international rugby match to watch a soccer game. Now I caught up with the rest of it.
That's massive.
This morning, but to watch that again 3 days later, oh Jesus. But yeah, from a player point of view, these guys spend their whole life trying to stay healthy and stay fit, and I'd be shocked if some of them aren't deliberating, the necessity or the smartness or the strategy to stay. Just honestly, because when you hear about long COVID alone, apart from the obviously the short term risk, but long COVID and the effect that's having on people, the players must be aware of that, and particularly if the series doesn't get finished, which, let's be honest, I would say it's probably, obviously depends how they get through the next week, but you would imagine if things stay the way they are, the series mightn't be played or finished, and then you're risking your long-term health, I think. So it must be very tough. Look, it's an unbelievable honour to play for the Lions. Obviously, Lions South Africa is absolutely huge, but what we've seen so far, and I know it's not the test matches, but what we've seen so far in terms of no crowds, in terms of probably shoddy opposition, obviously the health side of it, which should be the most important. I'd be shocked if players aren't starting to question how smart it is to stay.
You're back into a 3, Birch, are you?
Yeah, I'm broken. And I look at this, no one's fault. It's just, I really would love to I would love to see it get some kind of progress in terms of both squads being fit and being able to play games. I understand the quality is something that you can't fix, and the Springboks in terms of their depth has been massively affected by how many players are playing abroad, and it's fine to be able to bring them back in the top 21 to play for the Boks. But what we're seeing now is, teams with a proud history like the Lions and the Sharks, they're way off. And look at, there's another part to that as well. We've had a full season here in the Northern Hemisphere, whereas, they've only played bits and pieces, so that's obviously held them back a little bit. But I'm very uncertain how I feel about it. To be honest with you, my gut feeling is at the moment I actually don't really support it going ahead, and that's I wish I felt differently, but that's my honest opinion at the moment. Maybe things will change, and I'll see there's reasons other than money why everyone's making such an effort to keep it going. But I think it's at a knife edge now in terms of how important is player health, and not just player management, the families they're going to have to come back to. The South African teams, obviously, if they're catching it or transmitting it in camp in their bubble, they're bringing it back to their family. So that's what's really kind of concerning me at the moment.
Sorry, Murray, I interrupted you there a moment ago as well.
I was just going to add that one of the jarring things from yesterday, Ben Calverley, the managing director, came out before the game on Sky Sports, and he revealed that not everyone in the party is actually fully vaccinated. The Lions travelling touring party, which was a big surprise given that the information that had been shared was that they were. And I can only imagine, like, for the people who aren't fully vaccinated, it must be really scary. I mean, this thing is so transmissible. You're seeing the havoc it's wreaking in South Africa. And it seems just, I don't know, a bit careless to go over there without being fully vaccinated. So hopefully they can resolve that very quickly and those people can stay very safe. For the players who are fully vaccinated, etc., from speaking to a few of them, they're of the mindset that they won't be getting ill from this. It's just a case of disruption and they've got to adapt. But it just feels a bit weird and a bit wrong that things are going to plough on. And that's the reality. That's what we're seeing now. They're going to just make sure that this ploughs on all the way to a test series, even if it's, as we described earlier, with key guys missing and not a genuine test of best against the best. You might have your second string combination in the second row due to an outbreak or whatever. But they need the cash, and that's been really clear in everything they've said over the last few days. Jory Roux, the SA Rugby CEO, underlined that the test series is paramount. Calverley said the same. And obviously SA Rugby are in serious financial strife, and that's all that they're thinking about at the moment. But I agree with Birch. Like, what's the most important thing here? It's the health and well-being of everyone, and even people around the tour who are going and working at these games, working, I don't know, being around the stadium where Warren Gatland suggested they may have caught it or through their hotel. And obviously people need to work, but there's a bit of a risk element to it as well. So yeah, there's a real financial imperative, and I can understand that they want to earn as much as they can given the challenges there, but maybe it's a case where World Rugby can help them stay afloat if this thing is cancelled or the test series can't go ahead. But at the moment it's just a concerning situation, to be honest.
What about yourself, Murray, and work, if you don't mind my asking? Like, would you have doubts, or would you be hesitant to go over at this point? Because I know it's like a couple of weeks ago, it was sort of tentatively planned that you would, but in relation to your thoughts on the tour overall and what we're speaking about here, not necessarily your own health, I don't think it's fair to ask you about that, but I guess as an overall sort of a package, like, would you be reticent now to go? Yeah,
absolutely. I was talking to our superiors earlier on about this, and it is a very different scenario now to even a week ago, given that those bubbles who are like the bubbles where they're doing everything in their power not to expose themselves, if it's getting in there, then it's obviously a really tricky scenario. And even logistically, aside from the health thing, even logistically, like if you go over and you're covering it, but you have to isolate for however many days, you're not even going to be at the game. So obviously the point of being over there is reduced again. It's making everything really tricky, and everything you would have hoped that you could do either as a journalist or media or as a rugby squad is completely altered. Like last night was a prime example, one back on the bench. All the plans completely changed. We're obviously waiting to see, as we said today, what the latest is, but I mean, Gatland didn't know until the very last moment who he had available and who wasn't available. The players themselves were in exactly the same boat, all sitting in their hotel rooms trying to mentally prepare for a game. It comes to 5:30 p.m, still no word on their COVID cases. And in fairness, they deserve a bit of respect for coming late to the stadium, delayed warm-up, getting their heads right and doing the job as expected. As Birch said, the opposition wasn't particularly strong. It's again a shame that they can't have their box players back from Springboks camp because they've got an outbreak and they can't risk more players coming and going. So the whole thing is not what we would want from a line series. It's not it at all. There's no fans there. That's what makes a line series, and it's definitely hollow at the moment. Like, you know me, I'll be delighted if it rolls on and we get the test series. I think they would be savage encounters, but they wouldn't be what they should have been, if I can say it that way.
Will I ask you a couple of questions about the test series that have come from the members, or is it hollow to the point that you don't want to talk about it anymore, Mer?
I'll chat rugby. Okay.
Michael Halpenny, who incidentally asked one of the two best questions on our live Zoom event, the three of us last Friday, was it? Has another one here. So assuming the tests do go ahead, is it likely that Henderson and Itoje could be paired in the second row, or are they competing for the same place? I'll stick with yourself there, Mer, because I'm kind of afraid to ask Bernard about the lines again.
I actually think they could pair up. Yeah, I do. I think obviously with Alan Wynne-Jones' injury, it obviously furthers Ian Henderson's prospects of doing that. You saw in the Japan game, he switched over onto the tight head side of the scrum and filled that role that Jones generally does. Both of them call their lineouts, Henderson for Ireland when he plays Itoje for England, so you'd have to make a decision there. But I think there's plenty to like about that as a complementary pairing. Henderson maybe hasn't always been seen as a big scrummaging lock. James Ryan has done that job at tight head when he's played with Henderson, and Dev Toner before him. But there's no doubt about his power, and there's no doubt about his form. And one of the things I want to stress here is his form for Ireland and Ulster. Like, there's a lot of judgments being made on good performances against the Sigma Lions and the Sharks over the last couple of weeks, which I think is it's a bit ludicrous. The Japan game, absolutely, that was a proper test. Like, they were a good side, but I don't think having a few good moments against the Sigma Lions is going to decide that you should start a test. Henderson's form has been longer term than that. He was outstanding during the Six Nations. I actually think it was his best championship for Ireland ever, and probably saw him fulfill all that potential he's always had. So for me, he's looking really good for a test spot, and I think it could work with Itoje. Maybe Birch can give a bit more technical insight on why that might not be the case, but it makes sense to me.
No, I think it makes sense. I think I spoke to someone who's worked with him as a scrum coach, said absolutely no problem being a tight head lock at scrum time. He has really developed his line of calling. I think he's that ball carrier. He's got subtle footwork and he's got power in the collision, and that's the reality of it. I know Friday night I showed a few clips around how we have to get around, that Bok defence, which is obviously very narrow and very aggressive. But realistically, you need people who can get you those couple of yards up the middle as well, or else it's going to be very difficult. And I think Henderson can. Of the other locks, I think he's the best ball carrier. I think he's in pole position. Obviously, leadership credentials is recognised by Gatland making him captain last night. So, I'd be more shocked if he isn't a starting line with Itoje than if he was.
Another question here from a person whose name in the WhatsApp group is just a sequence of numbers, but I'll read it out. It's a good question. And I'll stick with yourself, Birch. So how much will it be form versus proven, he's wondering, or she, they are wondering how much form versus proven performer plays a part. This is going to be a curtailed tour to a significant extent, it would appear. The likes of Van der Merwe are getting opportunities he may not have expected, owing to circumstances beyond anyone's control, while Anthony Watson, who had a cracking season and is a proven Lions test player, has 15 minutes of game time after 4 rounds, brackets accounting for the cancelled game this weekend. Will Gatland's hand be forced to an extent in the backline? They now have only 2 games left before the test series, or potentially 3, I guess, now. And I assume one of those will be a dry run featuring the planned test lineup. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think someone could be very unlucky if they were a close contact and ended up missing 2 games and not getting their opportunity. But Gatland definitely will take into account the quality of the opposition as well. So I think proven past British and Irish Lions test form, being able to perform against the best teams in the world in a Rugby World Cup, and then glimpses during the year. I mean, I think he'll back the Saracens crew to step up if they need to, and obviously, he's not judging them on their England form or their championship stuff, but they have credit in the bank, and that's why it's going to be fascinating. I don't think there'll be many bolters. I think, this new schedule or the uncertainty around it will make it more likely that Gatland will start the first test with very much as close as possible to what he would have said a month ago, before they got together. I just think that's more likely, and it's going to be harder for the bolter, and look, obviously if someone doesn't get to play at all for between now and the first test or second test, like there's a chance in my mind that if they play Saturday, that they may decide to just go and go into isolation in Cape Town, and the next match could be the first test. I could see that happening too, and the box the same, and just try and get those 3 test matches played. I mean, I'd say everything is up for review at the moment. I'm sure, it's incredibly difficult for everyone involved in it. Absolutely, I don't think it's an easy decision to say, "Oh, look, we're packing up, going home." And I think, to save it, that may be even though it's not ideal, but that might be the next step if numbers aren't contained. That they play Saturday and then they basically lock it down until test games.
I know you were working in RT for the 20s, Bert, so I'll bring you back in on that in a moment. But just to get your own thoughts for the first time on this pod, at least, Murray, I'd say at half-time, 3 of us were chatting briefly, and even early doors. It looked a little bit dodgy. My own interpretation of it was, ultimately wrong as it turned out, but that maybe just with that England defeat and the unlikelihood that you can win a championship, you're just not quite at full intensity, if you like, and they were kind of falling off tackles and just didn't quite seem themselves based on what we'd seen of them so far in the tournament. But they turned it around. They turned it on its head and got the job done really impressively in that second half. So how did they go about it?
Yeah, it was really impressive. Some good coaching at halftime, I think, from Richie Murphy and co. They deserve credit there, but also the players who took ownership for it and got a bit of a grip on the control of the game and probably limited Italy's ability to strike with that stunning attack at times in the first half off Irish errors, giving them easy access into the game. I mean, one of them comes off a block down kick. They got opportunities from that, some looseness from Ireland with ball in hand, and probably not controlling the territory in the way they wanted to. We saw how clinical, you mentioned at half-time, Bert, how clinical they were when they got into the 22. And even at the start of the second half, you saw them kind of march in there. Carl Ford, who came off the bench, directed things really well, I thought, and had some nice variety to attack as Alex Kendall just grabbed it all by the scruff of the neck yet again. He's just been outstanding, even in a team full of lots of prospects over the last few weeks. And I think it's a really important experience for a young team, particularly given all the changes that they'd made and the fact that it probably wasn't their strongest frontline team on paper. Loads of other guys in the squad got an opportunity. Some went well, some didn't, but they managed to rally and bounce back. The likes of Sam Illo really just dominating in a few of his carries, being really mobile and aggressive around the pitch, showing some nice skill level as well. I thought it was all really encouraging, and they finished right over the top. And Italy, once they were starved of those maybe easier into the game, just didn't look as threatening as at all. At the same time, it's worth reiterating that they are a good team, and this is a really impressive victory from Ireland. Possibly for me, the most impressive of the lot so far, given the circumstances that you mentioned there, trailing at halftime and things not looking good for them. To have the bounce back effect from halftime was really impressive.
Who caught your eye yesterday, Brett, outside of Kendellen, who was biblical superhuman?
Yeah, I thought to be able to bring on Ford and Moxham, just gave them some direction. I thought Alex Soroka was excellent again. He's just really busy. He's their key line-out man in every game, and I think there's a lot about him. I'm not sure where I think he's gonna have to be a 6, to be honest, long term. But he played second row already, and I remember in this competition, I remember seeing him play second row in school. He's very good there. There's probably their attack isn't kind of as fluid as you would like, but yet there's a lot of good individual stuff within that. And I think I do agree with Murray. I think this Italian team are very decent. I would probably say if I was Kieran Crowley or Andy Farrell, I prefer to be Kieran Crowley in terms of the likelihood of, quite a few of those Italians coming through. Now, some of that's down to the quality we have ahead of them as well, but I do think it's a very good crop for Italy, and there's 5 or 6 players in that team that we'll see next year playing in the URC, and potentially can help Italy kind of start to catch up with the rest. From an Irish point of view, I thought, in fairness to Boyle, Loughnane, and Sam Elo, when they got together in the second half, they just stopped that scrum being the Achilles heel. Now, there wasn't a huge amount of scrums, but the couple that they needed to get the ball in and out or not give away a penalty on, they managed that. So I thought that was impressive. And I just think, look, at the game against England was unbelievably physical. Richie he'd gone his first choice 15, I would say, as pretty much for the first 3 games, which again made sense because they needed to get up and running. They needed to get match fitness and combinations. And this was the game that he'd identified to rotate. And I don't think that was in any way down to not respecting Italy. I know he knew Italy were a good side, but it was just the way it fell. And it was hard for those guys then to come in the first half and, be up to match speed. And then you had guys like Kendall and Sirocco, etc., who were backing up, after a very physical game against England. So I can completely understand, but I love, as Murray said, how at halftime they took on board the messages from the coaches, and they found a way to kind of stop Italy as well. They stopped Italy much better in the second half, and then again they just proved to be very clinical, close in. They're very patient. Doak is a good goal kicker. And they managed it out pretty comfortably. I felt the last 20 minutes I didn't really think Ireland were going to lose, so that'll be huge for them. But they've still got France obviously is going to be a tough game, and I think France and Italy are very much at the same level, so it's going to be interesting to see if we can finish with a win. I don't think we'll win at England. I don't see England losing, but if we could win 4 out of 5, it'd be a very decent competition for us.
Therese was saying yesterday as well, Murray, how great it is just to see Italy playing so well at that level. And I think part of me in the back of my mind when they had the ball was willing them on. Like, I obviously wanted Ireland to win the game, but you're sort of thinking of the bigger picture and reality in which Italy have more players who aren't just accustomed to losing at international level all the time, rather that they feel they can compete. They know they can compete with players in their peer group. And if you have some of those players coming through, bleeding into Kieran Crowley's senior squad, surely it is better than for the health of the Italy senior squad in the long term. So I guess my question is, can we take from this Italian 20 squad and maybe the underage structures there generally that there will be an upturn in the future, or have we been fooled before?
No, I think it is a trend now, maybe the last 3 years, but it takes a while to convert that into senior Six Nations quality and competitiveness, doesn't it? You got to go through the process with Benetton and Zebra. Obviously there's a chance to fast track there, given there's probably not as much quality ahead of them, but it requires a little bit of patience probably. You're already seeing in the national team, like Garbisi, Paolo Garbisi, the out half, was playing under 20s rugby very recently. His brother's now on this under 20s team. It looks like a great prospect. So you'd imagine in 4 or 5 years' time, the two of them could be playing for Italy at senior level. And there's a number of other guys, Mori, even Federico Mori, who's breaking through with the senior side. Trula, the fullback. They're guys who literally very recently were playing 20s rugby and now are showing a bit of real potential at senior level without the experience and the nous probably to be really steering a team to test match wins. It takes a long time to build that up, but it's only positive that they're showing this genuine competitiveness and potential, and not just flash in the pan stuff where they pull off a one-off win. This team has been really competitive. They nearly beat France. They hammered Scotland. They've got smarts about them as well as individual attacking flair, and that is really exciting. So fingers crossed that Benetton can bounce off their Rainbow Cup success and be competitive in the URC, that Zebra can improve under Michael Bradley again, and that these young guys coming through have a chance to maybe get some winning experience at club level as well. So they're not going into a national team just used to losing every game, because that's part of it as well. They need to have this kind of winning mindset they have now from 20s level and carry that right through.
That's absolutely key, Birch, isn't it? Instilling that mindset. And listen, you've been around enough team environments to know, particularly at underage level as well, or at grassroots level, that you can. It's almost like you can forge a player's personality, if you like, at this level, and that they carry it forward then when they make the step up to senior level. We see it quite often. People talk about the fearlessness of youth in sport sometimes, but often those young players who are taking chances or playing without fear are accustomed to winning. And some of these Italian guys, okay, they might not win every game in the Six Nations, but they shouldn't have the same hang-ups in the coming years when they do make that breakthrough as some of the guys who've been lingering around the senior squad for the last 5-6 years and just losing every game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's going to be key, the environments that they go into next season. We all hope that the URC is going to be much more competitive, which will demand more of these young Italians. Obviously, some of them will go into Benetton's system, and they're the Northern Rainbow Cup champions, but they have the potential to be very competitive. In fairness, like when Treviso are on, I think they can actually go toe to toe with anybody. They had a very surprising dip at the start of last year's tournament and never really recovered until the break. And I think Conor O'Shea, in fairness, and he realised that it was going to be very difficult to change the mindset or the belief in the players that he had at senior level, because they just become accustomed to losing pretty much every time they put on an Italian jersey. So they did put a huge focus on this generation and obviously the generation to come after them. Now, by all accounts, this is the group that they feel they have the golden generation as such. So they have a nice under 18s group, a nice under 17s, 16s, but this is the one that they do believe can potentially start to change Italian rugby. And they did restructure all their academies. They put the academies back in the old-fashioned Super 10 clubs. So there's a lot of satellite academies, which obviously give them more access to higher numbers of players, etc. And it does look like it's starting to come true. And they have been competitive with Ireland and the other home nations at under 18s level for the last couple of years, and I think they will continue to be so. So I think that is a huge difference. And realistically, like I am frustrated with Italy's lack of progress at senior level, but I would like to hope that we will start to see this now, particularly with Crowley going from Benetton, where he knows Italian rugby now since he's came over from Canada, and he's obviously going in there with a little bit of momentum from the win against the Bulls, and now this young crop coming through. Yeah, so look, they're not going to get off the bottom of the table quite quickly, but if they can certainly be more competitive and maybe get some success on summer tours and November internationals against the top 5 teams, well, then that'll be progress.
Certainly would. Speaking of progress at senior level, let's chat about Andy Farrell's men this weekend. Have you had a chance to look at the squads there, actually? I should ask before we talk about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had a look.
Perfect. Great. So, Murray, 8 uncapped players, and we know also from the USA that if you completely change your lineup, I think England had 12, was it, last weekend, that they can put it up to you. So, should expect a fairly tasty game again this weekend, and not only an opportunity for some of the uncapped players to raise their hands, but some of the guys with only a handful of caps against live opposition rather than a walkover.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting Ireland selection. As you say, USA gave England probably in the second half a better run, and they finished strong. So hopefully it'll be a challenge for this Irish team. But there's exciting elements to it all over the pitch. Balakoon and James Hume in the outside backs, and every single one of the uncapped players you work through here has really earned their place. Andy Farrell spoke about it last week, not like respecting themselves, Ireland, and not just dishing out caps to players who hadn't earned it. But you look at Balakoon's form since he's come back from that horrific hamstring injury, continuing to be athletic every time he's on the ball, continuing to make really good defensive reads and be competitive in the air. James Hume has really grasped his opportunity outside centre in Luke Marshall's absence and improved every single time he's played. He's got a wicked step. He's got a an assertive kind of mindset, and he wants the ball in his hands. Then you look to the pack, Nick Timoney, who's probably been a bit of a slower burner, but in Marcel Coetzee absence, he's absolutely accelerated his progress. He's rapid as well and has really worked hard in his jackal skills. Tom O'Toole's been around the camp a fair bit, but now gets his chance at tight head. And that's really exciting to see for Irish rugby, a new tight head emerging there. And then I suppose you mentioned the guys who have a bit of experience. Gavin Coombs didn't get much of it last weekend, but he gets a start at number 8. Really interesting to see Caelan Doris move to accommodate Coombs in his best position. And I just hope that USA make plenty of knock-ons so there's a few scrums for Coombs to thunder off, and maybe a few 5-metre taps as well. Then a bunch of uncapped players on the bench as well, in Wycherley, Paul Boyle, Blade and Harry Byrne. Again, you're hoping, as Birch said a couple of weeks ago, you're hoping to see a couple of guys really stamp their authority on this game and show that they can be players for Ireland now moving forward in the next couple of years. It's a wonderful opportunity given the circumstances around lines away and a couple of injuries, and that's opened the door even a bit more for a couple of guys. But it's hard not to be excited about what we're going to see on Saturday in Dublin.
Yeah, I'm hoping Andy Farrell doesn't forget to bring on Caelan Blade. I think he, of all people, warrants a cap at this point. I just want him to be an Ireland international and see what he can do. But as Murray was saying there, Birch, just so many, there are so many names to be excited about. If you were, when you're looking through that squad, who are the handful or fewer that you are most excited to see make their international bows?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to be up in Ravenhill quite a bit this year for Premier, and I really like Hume and Battlecloon, to be honest. Timoney, I think, is obviously a very good player, but it's going to be very difficult for him to really break through. But he deserves his opportunity, and it's a very good back row. I mean, the athleticism of those three with Doris and Coombs is exciting. It's actually a very athletic pack, with Baird, O'Toole. I mean, I think O'Toole has been earmarked for a while. I mean, he was one of those kind of development players who were always added to the squads from a long way out, and he has a huge amount of mobility and power. And as he gets more games, I think his scrummage and prowess will improve. And this is probably a safe bet to give him with Keller beside him and Kilcoyne, who are good technicians at scrum time. But yeah, I just think Battlecloon for me has something very, very special about him, and I'm really excited to see how he goes. I'd love to see him get lots of ball, to be honest, and I'd love to see us, being able to hold the ball for long periods. I think it's great Joey's getting to play again. I just felt, obviously with the injury to Farrell and him going to 12, he played the rest of the game, most of the second half at 12 last week, and that's fine. But I just love to see him at 10 in an Irish shirt, and with Johnny obviously being rested. So I like the team. It's an exciting team for me, and I'm actually lucky enough to be going there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him play.
And you mentioned, Gav, the Craig Casey thing, a bit of a joke, but it is nice for him to get a start now and get a chance from the off to boss a team like we know he does, and to bring his tempo, to bring his passing ability, to show he can kick accurately and defend well on top of all that. He's a very exciting player. Even when he came on against Italy for that debut, you saw the quality of the service and the tempo he brought, the quick taps twice, one of them leading to Ireland's last try for Keith Earls in the right corner. So he's shown that he can bring some of that stuff that Andy Farrell and his coaches are really talking about an awful lot. Speed has been something they've mentioned repeatedly in this kind of window, playing at a higher tempo, constantly stressing defence without giving them 3 seconds to set again after each phase. And that's definitely something that Casey wants to do. That's his natural game. And it's exciting that he'll definitely be able to play that. At times in Munster, that's a bit of a frustration. He's sometimes maybe playing a game that he isn't completely naturally suited to, for want of a better word. So he can definitely bring tempo to it, and as Birch mentions, with a pack that athletic and a backline full of finishing ability and athleticism, it could be a really exciting blend. It's important that they've got a bit of, experience is probably the wrong word. Hugo Keenan has 12 caps, but he's already a steady head there for them. Stuart McCluskey only has 5, but obviously he's experienced with Ulster, and James Ryan, 36 caps is a decent number, but he's a younger guy. He's captaining again, so they've kept a bit of that, I suppose, core there. Dave Kilcoyne, another one with plenty of caps. They've kept that kind of core there, guys who've been around the squad and are now taking on those leadership roles. It was interesting to hear Farrell talk about that last week like how different a camp is without Johnny Sexton and all the others who generally speak up. And by all accounts, Keenan and Doris are two of the guys now pushing things on. So that's been a good development for them in this window as well.
Could I ask you about Balakoon specifically, Murray? Just because I think he excites a lot of people in that he may be the sort of raw athlete that we have lacked, without meaning to sound unkind to all of the superb back three players we have at our disposal at international level. But I wonder, does he have like that extra half a yard of gas that maybe some of them don't? We've had conversations in the past about like fast twitch muscle fibre and how Irish people, genetically speaking, actually don't necessarily have that. Like Irish people through the ages have been built more for like endurance, maybe ironically given our history, but like that's why we excel in sports like rowing and so on. And when somebody say like Stephen Ferris comes along, who definitely had that fast twitch muscle fibre, I was talking to him about it recently, they're kind of anomalies. And Balakoon, without meaning to big him up too much, he may be that type of player for us who can just, if we're looking, like if Andy Farrell is looking to play at speed and stress defences, he's the kind of guy that you have to keep your eye on constantly. And he, like, ostensibly will just burn you. Yeah,
you want to get him in positions where he can go 1-on-1 or even 1 against 2, and he can use that pace and that change up and acceleration. He's robust through contact. You're right, he is athletically superb, but it definitely over the last years, like he was raw, obviously coming through. He was a late starter in rugby not that long ago, playing junior rugby with Enniskillen, and has had a really remarkable rise since. But he has polished off any of that rawness for me. I think his decision making has been really good, and especially around the defensive side of things, it's where you expect a winger, maybe with his late arrival into the game, or any younger winger really, to make poor decisions. But I think he's been consistently strong in that area, and it is also wonderful just that the journey is slightly different, that he's come from a different background. He was playing with Enniskillen. He wasn't a superstar mapped out by any means. He did a bit of time with the sevens, and then Ulster realised just how much potential he has. And I really do look at him, again, we're not trying to overhype it, and think there's loads more there. His attitude towards it all is also not a surprise. I remember he played for Ulster against Leicester away, and he was outstanding. And he came in for the interview afterwards, and I don't know if he'd done much media, and you're thinking, okay, he'll probably be really kind of nervous about this or overawed by the occasion, as some guys maybe are, but he kind of just shrugged his shoulders and, I just got the ball and ran and scored a try or beat a few defenders. It wasn't a big thing for him, and that's a great mindset to have, because some guys who've been in it all their lives and dreaming of it since they were 12, they do get a bit overawed by the occasion. He's a guy who, for me, just casually takes it in his stride. I think they call him the cat up in Ulster, and just gets on with things and beats defenders. So it's a brilliant story, and he's got a great potential there.
Certainly does. What about the States, Birch, before we wrap? Like, they're always in a bit of a peculiar predicament, I think, in that they're obviously putting unbelievable effort into having as best a team as possible, or as good a team as possible, but ultimately it kind of is mostly about the World Cup for them, I guess, or when they have the opportunities to play tests like this one. They gave a great account of themselves last weekend against England, but say this United States team, or even setup, versus some of them that we've seen over the years, or how they've progressed over the years. What do you make of it?
Look, I think that the challenge, it was really promising to see them, be competitive against England, particularly finish quite strong. Sometimes though, the week after, when they've had a decent performance, not just USA, but a lot of those, tier 2 countries, they can't withstand it. So that's obviously a bit of concern for me. In theory, it should be getting better, because obviously now they have the MLR. Although having said that, I've watched a reasonable amount of it. The level isn't high enough yet to produce, quality international players. But at least there's a stronger competition structure, and I think it will grow, and it's been done very prudently, so it's less likely of it breaking down financially, which is the most important thing there. They just need to build a league year on year that's getting better in quality. So yeah, and I think fitness wise, my former head of performance in the Dragons, Hugh Bevan, who used to work with vast experience in rugby union, but also was with England cricket for a long time. World Rugby facilitate him working with them, and he's been there from a year before the World Cup. And I know Gary Gold was instrumental in that. There's a big question mark around the fitness levels, and they're putting a huge focus on that. And I thought, to be fair, that was one of the reasons they were able to stay in the game against England. So that's promising for sure. But like, just to give you, example, there's a guy on the bench, was on the bench last weekend against England, Wooching, I'm probably saying it wrong. I would have been following him for quite a while because he was quite a good college footballer and a really good athlete. He signed for a Federal 1 club in France. So, and that's not like, look at it, he may go over there and do really well, but that's the challenge they have. They've players who are just desperate to get an opportunity professionally, and that's great. But it's becoming harder for them to get those opportunities in the big leagues. So until I think that happens and the MLR continues to improve, I think it'll be hard for them to back it up, to be honest.
Just on the US, a quick shout for Luke Carty, who looks like he'll be at 10 again. He did really well last weekend on his test debut, slammed over that 50-metre penalty that people have probably seen, but excellent chop tackling. I don't think he missed a single one against some big units, some nice passing and kicking and play. You even saw the trademark Carty banana kick to touch at one stage. Again, talk about journeys, like he's been on an interesting one. Just over a year ago, Connacht said there's no contract there for you. I was speaking to him this week. He said he was pretty much going to pack in rugby, play for Bucks. He's a great club man and do his masters. And then the American, I suppose, ancestry, his granny Joan was born in New York. That kind of came to light a bit more, and suddenly he was on the way over to the States, and he's done really well in the LA U20s, and there he is playing test rugby, and he'll be back in Dublin playing against some guys that he was training with in Connacht. I think all his family and friends have tickets, so it's a wonderful story for him, and he's still only 23, and again, like you saw what he could do last weekend, so it's exciting. The Carty genes are definitely strong around that kind of footballing ability and kicking. They've got some creative skills, and no doubt they're very proud of his journey.
They're cultured, aren't they?
Yeah.
Very, very cosmopolitan now as well, the LA U20s. Easy on the teeny. We'll leave it there, boys. Murray, thanks a million as always.
Cheers.
Birch, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody at home as well. For all of the extra Lions coverage, members.the42.ie. You can become a member of the 42. Tune into all of Murray's extra work that he's putting in throughout the course of this tour. Plus, you get access to all of our other podcasts and offerings as well. Thinking of Gav Cooney's Behind the Lines, the Football Family, which has been going on while the Euros continue, or as they reach their conclusion this weekend. Loads more. Check it out, members.the42.ie. It's €5 for a monthly subscription, €5 a month, or €42 for the year. We will be back over the weekend with Murray, and back on Monday as well for members with Murray and Owen. Plus next Thursday, 3 of us back in this regular slot for members and non-members alike. So until one of those days, mind yourselves, enjoy everything over the weekend, and take it easy.